Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy and with the brand new video for you guys today, and welcome to my channel. Do all the things the algorithm likes: like, comments, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Welcome to the video. Hope you all enjoy yourselves. Today, I got a new reaction video for you guys. Haven't had a reaction video in a long time. Sorry, I'm speaking way too fast, but you know, y'all know how my brain works. I gotta slow down. But today's video, we got a video from LevelCapGaming called "Amazing Games That Fail." There's a lot of games out there that, you know, don't make the money to sustain itself or continue on, that a lot of us would say are some of the best games made. So we'll see what his list is of games that, you know, are really good that didn't really get the mass success. If there's any games that you play that you enjoyed that, you know, had mass success, leave in the comments below. As well, we do now have a separate reaction channel, because I feel like I don't want to like have all of my content on one channel. This is a gaming channel, and I want to separate the game, like the non-gaming things, from the gaming channel. So there's in my description box, I have my link tree, and in that link tree there's all the links you need to get to my other channels, including my Twitch stream, which I stream Monday through Thursday, 6 from Eastern to midnight. So follow those things. Watch my reaction videos more frequently, things like that. The only time you ever see a reaction video on this channel is when it's about video games. So it's not about video games. It'll be on the primary reaction channel when it comes to, like, you know, everything else. So let's get into this video. We've been kind of like rumbling on a little bit. Let's watch LevelCapGaming's you know, the amazing games that fail. As always, the link to the video will be in the description box below, with all my content links as well. So always watch the original video and leave some love for the original creator.
As a lifelong gamer, I've watched many games over the years with huge potential crash and burn, sometimes in spectacular fashion, and other times studios just made small mistakes that prevented fantastic ideas from really flourishing. Today, I want to talk about the games that I thought should have been way bigger than they were, and what exactly happened to prevent that. And I think most gamers have at least one game that we remember and think it could have been amazing. I definitely have a few, but the first one that stands out in my head for sure is Battlefield 5's Firestorm. In 2019, DICE's first attempt at breaking into the Battle Royale market was a bold one. Firestorm brought a new giant circle of fire that closed in on the combat area, similar to PUBG's Blue Circle, but this time 90% of the environment was totally destructible and eradicated by that circle. Plus, the player destroyable environment also eliminated other annoying problems present in other Royales, where players could just camp stairways or certain angles in a building. Now players had the option to create their own entryways into buildings or just blow them up entirely. On top of which, the graphics were, and honestly still are, amazing. There was vehicle gameplay, long-range sniping and realistic bullet physics, a fun map, artillery strikes, and all kinds of crazy emergent moments.
I actually didn't play Firestorm. I played Battlefield 5 briefly. I'm a big Battlefield fan, but I just didn't like how the multiplayer was shaping up. It was becoming too much like, you know, the modern, at that time frame, everyone trying to copy like the elimination style of shooters, where, you know, KD doesn't matter anymore and your actual performance don't matter anymore. Now what just matters is if you got any damage done to someone, it counts as a kill for you and your someone else in your team. So, you know, basically like Overwatch, where, you know, even if you aren't the one who got like the actual kill, you got credit. So it's like everyone wins kind of situation in Battlefield. I just didn't like that. Also, just because I didn't like Battlefield 1, which isn't Battlefield 1, but it was Battlefield 1 because World War 1, because I didn't like that game either, because I just didn't feel like the weapons in that game style just didn't work in modern gaming. I feel like Battlefield 5 also had the same problem. So I kind of like, I played the story of Battlefield 5, I played like a few matches of multiplayer, and that was basically really it. It's probably like the least amount of time I spent in any Battlefield game, and I've played basically all the ones that have been on console. And I just ignored Firestorm because I just didn't care about trying a Battlefield Battle Royale, so I don't have any experience with it. But, you know, I've heard good things about it, and I feel like the reason why we don't have like a Firestorm sequel is probably because, you know, the greed of EA, essentially. Like, I'd imagine this video is probably mentioned too, where it's like, in order to play Firestorm, you have to buy Battlefield 5. Most battle royales are free to play. You know, you don't have to buy Modern Warfare to play Warzone. Apex is free. Fortnite is free. So that's, if any game's gonna make a battle royale and you put it behind a paywall, your chance of success is that much freaking like lower, because if you want more people to play your game, they're gonna be like, well, I don't have to pay to play Apex. I don't have to pay to play PUBG. I don't have to pay to play Fortnite. I don't have to pay Warzone. Why would I pay money to play your battle royale? And that's when the developers keep in mind when making battle royales, looking at you, Halo, or anybody else, or even Battlefield. If Battlefield decides, hey, people are saying Firestorm is actually pretty good, maybe we should consider bringing it back for the next Battlefield game, or work on it right now as an in between the current Battlefield and the next Battlefield. Make sure your battle royales are not behind a paywall.
To this day, it's still one of my favorite battle royales. Sadly though, DICE always seems to be the last to adapt to new trends, and instead of making this mode free to play, which Call of Duty did with Warzone shortly after, EA locked Firestorm behind the Battlefield 5 paywall, which was pretty steep. And with Battlefield 5 still suffering from its terrible launch and buggy status, the mode was pretty much doomed to fail. The slow rollout of improvements and updates dramatically impacted the perception of support for this mode, with many players believing that it was essentially just shipped to die, or that its support hinged on it actually finding an audience that wasn't there. And shortly after its release, DICE pulled all support from Firestorm before it could really refine the gameplay and fix some of its bigger problems. To me, this one really hurts, as I think it just should have gotten so much more playtime in development, but didn't because of poor strategies with how it was deployed. Now the next
I feel like that's the entirety of just Battlefield's life cycle. The entirety of Battlefield has always just been poor strategy. Battlefield at its core has always been different from Call of Duty, but because EA's EA, they always try to target the Call of Duty crowd with Battlefield, so they try to manipulate Battlefield to be more appealing towards the Call of Duty crowd, which has always hurt Battlefield. You ask most people, they tell you Bad Company 2 is their Battlefield game, they'll say Battlefield 3, and then they'll say after Battlefield 3 it kind of went downhill because it started to appeal to the Call of Duty crowd more. Battlefield 4 is a great game, but it stopped feeling as much like a Battlefield game. It started feeling more like you can tell that they're trying to get the people who play Call of Duty to really start playing the game. Think about what's the most played map Battlefield 4? Operation Locker. It's a map that's basically a small scale map with no vehicles, so you're basically just running around killing people. So it's basically a Call of Duty map, and that's what the most played map was in Battlefield 4. You think about how Battlefield is now. They changed Battlefield so much to try to fit a different mode that's not Battlefield. It hurt the game. They release their games sometimes in the exact same month or in the same 2-month time frame as Call of Duty. And if you're a Call of Duty player, you're like, I only have $60 and now 70. Which one am I going to buy? I don't have all the money in the world. I can only buy one of these games. You would always choose Call of Duty because you're a Call of Duty player. Whereas Battlefield fans will always choose Battlefield, but there's always been less Battlefield fans than Call of Duty fans. The issue with Battlefield is the higher ups don't understand that Battlefield for the most part is kind of niche. You're only going to get people who play Battlefield who are hardcore fans of Battlefield, and people who want to try out a more realistic FPS experience compared to, say, Call of Duty.
This game on my list failed less spectacularly, but it was certainly a diamond in the rough. Now I'm talking about Crysis 3's multiplayer mode. A franchise not particularly well known for its multiplayer experience accidentally knocked it out of the park with Crysis 3, offering a myriad of interesting weapon choices and super cool power suits that rewarded players for mastering all of the different modes. Crysis 3 was a true hybridization of the arena shooter and tactical shooter that worked stunningly well. Power jumping, sliding, stealth combat, mixed.
Now we're pausing again pretty early here, but I'm a big Crysis fan. I even have a video, one of my most watched videos on here. There's a few thousand views on it, which is, again, that's someone who's basically a small content creator who doesn't even have 400 subscribers. One of my most viewed videos is a Crysis video. It was for a series that I did when I was first trying to become a content creator, when I first failed as a content creator, called Where Is. Where Is was a series that I did where I talked about games that, that we all want to play, but we haven't seen a sequel or prequel or remake of it at all. And I did one for Where's Crysis 4. Now there actually is a Crysis 4 in development. Back then there was no signs of a new Crysis game because Crytek is going through a lot of financial issues. Crysis to me was basically what Killzone wanted to be a competitor to Halo. Crysis was multi-platform, but it was a Halo competitor. Halo doesn't really have a competitor because it's, again, like Battlefield, is kind of niche. So you kind of had to find something that had super soldiers and super suits, that's an arena shooter, but also kind of tactical at the exact same time, which Killzone tried, but Killzone was trash. Crysis, on the hand, was very, very good, and it had a high skill ceiling in terms, a lot of games have, for the most part a low skill ceiling, so anyone can be good at it. But with Crisis 3 specifically, you have to like be able to manage so much with just your suit, where if you were a really good player, you can maximize it and it will make the game feel like it was unbalanced. It wasn't, but if you were so good at using the mechanics of the game, you just felt you were just that much higher on the skill gap between someone who couldn't, you know, even do average with their suit. So it was a high skill ceiling game that kind of, you know, was in competition with Halo, but because of Crisis itself being niche, so you're already niche competing against a more successful niche multiplayer experience. Because Halo, or like it or not, right now is kind of a niche game because people don't really want to play arena shooters. Crisis just had a hard time competing, period. You're competing with Halo, competing with Gears of War, you're competing with Call of Duty, competing with Battlefield, competing on all these shooters, and people don't really know you all that well because you're kind of like, you got a new game, but you're new to multiplayer. You know, because I don't think Crisis 1 had multiplayer, I don't think Crisis 2 had multiplayer. I played all 3 games, I don't remember if those first 2 had multiplayer. But, you know, when it comes down to it, the people are going to play what they're familiar with. People are going to play the games that they are aware of and that they know and things like that, instead of learning how a new game works and how a new game plays. The Crisis 3 though is a phenomenal game, and EA did do like a trilogy remaster. I don't know if the multiplayer is a thing for remaster, but if you want to play a really good science fiction game, play Crisis.
With shotguns, bows and arrows, and assault rifles, and it all worked and looked fantastic at the same time. Movement mechanics, solid gunplay, and some of the best graphics that you had in a multiplayer game at that time. I was personally fully ready to make it a main focus of my FPS lineup. However, it seemed clear that the developers just weren't anticipating a multiplayer success with Crisis 3, and it soon ran into issues that contributed to its downfall. One of the main issues was really simple, and it was just that the game's matchmaking system was slow, and it often put players into heavily unbalanced matches. This led to unnecessary frustration that really had nothing to do with the gameplay. And while Crytek did release some...
What is that unnecessary frustration he's talking about? Is having good players play against bad players. We see this right now, even in 2023 with modern video games, we see this issue. You have, you know, the argument of hidden MMR and skills matchmaking, which we'll talk about all of that in a whole new video. But that's what that's about. You know, like I said, there's a high skill gap. So you have these very, very good players, and they're playing against very, very bad players. The very, very bad players, I'm like, I'm not playing this game. Then the very good players are like, I'm not having fun because these games are too easy. But then when all the new players leave and they're playing against the people who are at their skill level, they stop having fun because now they're not having, like, you know, those high kill games anymore. People who are very good at games, they love seeing the 29s and 5s, 29s and 3s, to the 50s and 10s when it comes to like their KD. So when it goes from that to 30 and 15, it's like, oh, this isn't fun anymore, because they want to. That's not a video they can make on YouTube. There's no clips in that because the KD spread is too close. So that's what people hate skills matchmaking. But Crisis didn't have skills matchmaking, but because all the bad players left, the good players are going against each other, and they hated it, so they end up leaving too. That's the issue you have when it comes to, you know, matchmaking, and it's kind of like a lose-lose no matter what you do. If you do skills matchmaking, people are going to be mad at you. If you don't, you lose players. So it's like you can't really win.
Patches to address bugs and balance issues, there's pretty much no major updates or expansions to keep players interested in the multiplayer. This basically showed players that Crytek had no plans whatsoever to build a gaming community around their multiplayer experience. And I think it's truly sad that they were unable to really capitalize on a fantastic formula. Next up on my list is a game that is absolutely legendary. Sadly, it's legendary for its failure rather than its success, and that was the 2013 SimCity reboot. SimCity is an important franchise that started many things in gaming. The Sims, one of EA's biggest IPs, simply wouldn't exist without SimCity. I'm a
3 Doors Down, Away from the Sun Anniversary Tour. Special guest Candlebox.
I was enjoying three
I'm a
Doors
lifelong
Down.
fan of the SimCity franchise, and I was extremely excited for the reboot, which boasted advanced graphics, online multiplayer features, and a new simulation engine that promised a more realistic and complex city building experience. However, the launch of SimCity was disastrous thanks to a ton of technical issues that prevented many players from even being able to log into the game. Unlike any of the previous titles, it required a persistent online connection even for the single-player mode, as the cities were saved and simulated in the cloud, which led to massively overloaded servers. Players ended up losing entire saves after putting in hundreds of hours into cities, or your city that you had put tons of hours into would just become non-functional due to bugs that would simply create traffic jams that you couldn't fix. And apparently many of the producers had been warned that if EA pushed the game out, it would fail spectacularly, but it didn't stop the publisher from jumping the gun. Beyond the technical problems, there was also criticisms of the game's design, particularly the small city size and the lack of certain features that were present in previous titles. Electronic Arts attempted to address these issues with various patches and updates, but the game just was never able to recover. And honestly, SimCity's concept looked extremely promising on many levels, and when it did work, I actually enjoyed it a lot. But the bugs could simply...
Me personally, I didn't play a lot of SimCity games. I played, them briefly here and there, and I enjoyed them when I did. I feel like in 2023, a SimCity game should succeed if it's marketed properly, because we play a lot of just weird games that are mostly just time wasters that aren't necessarily like fun, but they're addicting. And SimCity is something that will be addicting. Like think about Power Wash Simulator or House Flip and Lawnmower Simulator, things like that. SimCity should be like being played just as much as more than those games when you think about it, but it's not for whatever reason.
They destroy hundreds of hours of your design and progress, which not only left the game a failure, but destroyed the entire franchise. Since then, other games like Cities Skylines have taken up the mantle that EA threw away in spectacular fashion. The next game I want to talk about is called Evolve. From the developers of Left 4 Dead, a revolutionary co-op zombie video game which honestly spawned a ton of other clones and other ideas, the next game from the publisher certainly had high hopes from gamers. It was one of the first asymmetrical PvP survival games that pit 4 human character players against a player-controlled monster. It was pretty innovative at the time and seemed like it would be a massive hit leading up to its launch in 2015. Unfortunately, though, the situation did not go well leading up to launch. The announcement of pre-order DLC that contained playable characters, over 40 cosmetic DLCs, a season pass, and other super aggressive monetization practices massively soured the appeal. And while Evolve was a commercial success at launch, players quickly became divided, both figuratively and literally. If you didn't buy the DLC, you were basically missing out, and it was more challenging to actually find matches without somebody who owned the DLC in your party. However, the players that actually stuck with this game despite its DLC and kind of predatory monetization model found plenty worth praising. The character designs were fresh and offered a lot of unique gameplay that worked really well in the co-op environment. The monster gameplay was also much more complex than just hack and slash. You had to employ real strategy to survive every match. Even the story and character dialogue seemed really well written and suited to the tone of the game. But
trying to find like a good spot to like stop and speak on Evolve. I remember when Evolve was first announced, and everybody was so excited for it. Everyone was like, "Oh my god, I can't wait!" It was Turtle Rock Studios who are the brains behind Left 4 Dead. So it's like, here we go. This is going to be super cool. And in theory, it was. We played a good bit of Evolve with my friends, and it was fun. But it would have its imbalances. And I think just in general, when it comes to like these solid games, these play versus AI, kind of horde based, but like 4v1 kind of thing as well. It's like a PvE versus PvP kind of situation. That's starting to die out. People are being less and less interested in this formula of games. Think about Resident Evil. Resident Evil tried it with I don't know if it was Resistance. It might be Resistance, where you could play as basically someone who summons all these like ads to attack other players, and you can control the ads as well, so you can like morph into them, and basically you're trying to prevent them from escaping. You can play Mr. X, things like that. That exists because of Evolve. Games like that, like, even when it comes to like the Friday 13th game and Dead by Daylight, those games exist because of Evolve. But Evolve didn't succeed anywhere near to the level of those games. And it's like, well, why? It seems like it's a cool game. It's science fiction. It definitely has like some Lovecraftian things to it, but you have like there's like the Cthulhu freaking like monster that you can play as. The reason why it failed is because, again, the publishers did a horrible job marketing it. And again, as he's saying throughout the segment, There were so many microtransactions for the games where people just stopped caring. There were so many microtransactions, you know, so monetization killed the game, which is ironic because the game ended up becoming free to play.
It simply wasn't enough to keep the majority of players on board. The player count went from nearly 30,000 to 200 in less than a year. In 2016, the devs scrambled to save the game by relaunching it as a free-to-play experience that revamped pretty much everything about it, including the overly aggressive monetization. Evolve Stage 2 again attracted a massive initial player base, but again went from about 50,000 concurrent players to a handful in just a few months. There's a lot more nuance and depth to Evolve's rise and fall that simply won't fit into this video, but ultimately was yet another case of a fantastic core experience that just got overshadowed by external factors. Still, Evolve has left a really strong impression on many players that were able to enjoy it. The game still has a loyal community of fans who love the concept and gameplay. They've been trying to keep Evolve alive following the shutdown of official servers in 2018 by hosting private matches using peer-to-peer connections or modding tools. The next game on the list can't really be considered a failure, but was more of a title that really missed the mark with its perceived potential, and that was The Division. Most gamers remember watching The Division's
I'm a big Division fan. I'm a big Tom Clancy fan. I play a lot of Tom Clancy games, even though, you know, he didn't make any of the games. He actually died a few years ago. Ubisoft just still makes games with his name on it because, you know, his estate still owns the rights to like everything involved with him. Division 1 succeeded by all measured metrics in terms of, you know, a lot of people played it. It had a very good following. The issue of the Division isn't the Division 1's fault, but Division 2. Division 2 killed the Division because Division 2, it wasn't as good, but also it should exist in terms of the same thing kind of about Destiny. You don't need to have a full separate sequel or something that could just have an expansion. If Division 2 was an expansion to this Division 1, it would have been way more successful. And it becomes like, even though Destiny 2 is massively successful, I think Destiny 2 would have been better if it was an expansion to Destiny. Like if these games, the Division, Destiny, and games like them, like Warframe as well, are MMOs at their core, the MMO light, as I like to call them. And when it comes down to it, when it comes to MMO, you don't make a new MMO. You just have an expansion. Like it takes a lot. It has to be like a massive change of scenery and change of graphics and change of engine. And you can't even like make an expansion that can withstand it. So you must make a whole new game for you to make a whole new game. Division 2 didn't need to exist. It could have just been an expansion. They could have released this, like they had an E3 or whatever. It's like, here comes the brand new expansion of the Division. You're gonna go to DC, etc., etc., etc. Make the price whatever it's gonna be, and there you go. You have this one entity, this one game that just has an expansion instead of a sequel, and that sequel did live up to what the first game was, as well as just the usual Ubisoft downgrades that the Division had. People lost interest for that as well, and the bullet sponge enemies. I feel like if there's any one thing to say on why the Division can't be a mass success, it's the enemies. The enemies in the game are too bullet spongy, and it breaks immersion for people, because people, when they see a modern era video game, or thinking to themselves, I should kill this enemy pretty quickly because it's a modern era video game. They don't have super suits on. This isn't Halo. This is Crisis. Why is it taking forever for me to kill this person? And people lost interest because it breaks their immersion.
Gameplay reveal trailer for the first time and thinking,
I'm gonna pause again just to say, like, even myself as a Division fan, I have the moments where I'm playing Division 2 where it's like, this is taking me too long to freaking like kill. I have good weapons, but this enemy is just too tanky. This isn't fun. I don't want to play this anymore. And another issue with Division 2 is the game kind of ignores people play games solo. A lot of MMOs nowadays are catering to both sides of solo and people who play in groups. Division 2 doesn't give a fuck about you if you play solo. If you play solo Division 2, you're kind of just shut out of luck.
well, there's no way that Ubisoft is actually going to be able to make a game that looks this good. But amazingly, the final product looked incredibly similar to that trailer. However, the marketing for the game was also very misleading. Many players were expecting something far more tactical and realistic, but what they got was more of a traditional action RPG approach to the otherwise dark and gritty world. Many of the AI enemies were simply bullet sponges, which felt very awkward when engaging them with modern realistic weaponry. You could improve your damage per second in the game by finding clothing items and other accessories that raised your power level. The general game mechanics felt very misaligned with the dark Tom Clancy theme. And then of course there was also rampant cheating. Despite a major effort by the developers to revamp the core gameplay for a slightly more tactical field, the Division suffered an epidemic of hackers that ran rampant through the virtual streets of New York City. The PvP Dark Zone quickly evolved into an imbalanced hacking paradise, with Ubisoft clearly not ready to deal with.
Like, don't get twisted, that's all the Dark Zone is. Dark Zone is the original extraction shooter.
Anti-cheat solutions. It was almost guaranteed that you would either get ganked by players with better gear and no means of escape, or simply wiped out by a cheater pretty much every time you stepped foot in the Dark Zone. So while many players approached the Dark Zone with the hopes that it might be a more skill-based and tactical experience, it ended up being comically broken and massively imbalanced in most regards. Now, arguably, The Division wasn't a bad game at its core, but the theme and marketing played havoc with the expectation. Many players were expecting the Dark Zone to be something a lot more like what Escape from Tarkov ultimately became. Ubisoft took an amazing engine, fantastic visuals, a great story, and cool gameplay idea and bogged it down with very weird gameplay mechanics few people were expecting to see in a tactical shooter. And while the game was still a financial success and went on to make a sequel, it simply never achieved the heights that many players were expecting, myself included. Next up is a game that was designed to pretty much revive the arena shooter. It was called Lawbreakers, and it was a fast-paced multiplayer first-person shooter featuring gravity manipulation and wild character abilities. The game's development was led by none other than Cliff Bleszinski, one of the lead creators of the Unreal Tournament games and the popular Gears of War franchise, and thus was highly anticipated due to his involvement. Now, I was invited to play the game early with a bunch of other content.
It's right now that we have the Xbox Series X and modern PCs and PS5, Cliff Bleszinski, bring it back. Like, I'm pretty sure, you know, people will lose their shit if you brought it back. Bring back Lawbreakers, have it running for like the modern like systems. Ignore last gen, just outright ignore last gen. Don't even bother making it PS4 and Xbox One. Ignore them. PS5 only, Xbox Series X only, and PC only. That's what you should need to be doing. Just bring it back. You know, Fortnite's doing great things for Epic. I don't know if Cliff B's still at Epic or not. I have to look into that. But Cliff B, you're never gonna see this video, but if you do, that might be a good decision to bring back Lawbreakers. Because right now, when it comes to video games, people are kind of like in a lull where there's nothing really to play except the same things over and over again. We're still playing Rainbow Six 8 years later, still playing Apex, still playing Fortnite. We kind of do want something new, and this looks fun. Lawbreakers looks fun as hell. Just make it. Just make it. Bring it back. Play it. Let us play it. Let us enjoy it. You know, because Halo, as I said before, as an arena shooter, is becoming very niche because people aren't really into arena shooters anymore. This game, we have like throwing like all like think about the skins you can have for this game. Think about the collaborations you can have. Like, again, Fortnite's biggest thing right now is the collaborations. Think about the collabs and all the skins you can have for these characters. People will play the hell out of this game in 2023. I'm telling you this right now.
Creators, and it became clear immediately to pretty much all of us that the game, despite it being really fun, just wasn't going to work at the relatively steep price point for such a small multiplayer experience. Even at $30, it was asking a lot given the insane Overwatch craze and PUBG success that was going on right when the game launched. Most of the early feedback I was hearing and agreed with was that it just felt like it should have been a free-to-play game, as there simply was going to be no other way for the game to compete with some of the other juggernauts in the market. And despite the positive reviews from players and critics, Lawbreakers just failed to attract a significant player base, and the game's player count dwindled very quickly after release. And while the developers attempted to address the issue by offering free weekends and price cuts, they ultimately never had a plan to make the game free to play, and it simply failed. Shortly after, Bosky Productions announced that they would be ceasing development entirely. The rise and fall of Lawbreakers is often cited as an example of the difficulty of breaking into the multiplayer shooter market and the importance of finding the right price point and timing for a game's release. Despite a few flaws with the game, I feel like its innovation and fun factor deserved a much bigger audience, which it never received. Now, the final game I want to talk about today...
I'm telling you this right now. Imagine that them announcing like the game coming back as free to play on, you know, PC, Xbox Series X, and PlayStation 5. People will play it because you have people, again, remember this, you have people who don't want to play Overwatch, people who just, the visuals aren't really their thing for whatever reason. They don't play Overwatch. This game kind of looks like the same kind of formula. They will play it. People will try out anything if it's free to play. Just try it out. And then again, you can make all that money that I don't want to make the game free to play. You make all that money through cosmetics. I know we all hate it. I know we all hate microtransactions and battle passes, but if that game has a battle pass and has, you know, microtransactions for its cosmetic skins and things like that, just like Halo, just like Overwatch, just like Warzone, it's going to make money. There's a reason why these games are making so much money. There's a reason why Fortnite makes what, a billion a year. It's a free to play game. There's a reason why freaking Apex makes a lot of money. It's a free to play game. When people who play a game for free and they see a nice skin they want to rock, they'll buy it. Every single time. I play a lot of R6. I keep buying skins in R6 because they keep looking cool. So the same thing here. If you love a game, if you're enjoying a game, you're going to spend some money on it. So Lawbreakers could succeed. It could release, you know, with a touch up and refreshing and whatnot this year, next year, or whatever, as a free to play title, and people will play it. You know, I'm trying to think of like that other game. What was it called? Paragon? Isn't Paragon the name of it? Is it Paragon Prime? I think it's called Paragon. It's either Paragon or predecessor. It was kind of like the exact same thought process where it's like the game failed and it wasn't like very good, but if it did the right things, it probably would succeed. If it had the right marketing scheme, it would succeed. If it had the right people trying to play it and like it wasn't behind a paywall, it would succeed. You know, the issue for a lot of things is if you have a paywall for a game that other people can play for free. Again, so think about like Predecessor. I think Predecessor is like a mobile FPS game. So if you compare that to, say, another MOBA, it's free to play Smite. It's free to play Overwatch, which is also a mobile FPS. It's free to play League of Legends, which is a MOBA. So if you have a game that costs people money to play, there's a very, very small chance that you'll be successful, because people aren't going to try a game that they don't know if they'll like when games that are established in the community are free to play. You know what I'm saying? So if you catch what I'm trying to say here, then, you know, hopefully I made sense.
Is one that is responsible for EA's most profitable game ever, but on its own never really achieved the deserved level of respect, and that's Titanfall 2. Following the highly praised Titanfall 1, the sequel added a single-player campaign that honestly is some of Respawn's finest storytelling to date. At launch, it was praised for its level design, storytelling, and gameplay mechanics, plus the campaign also laid the groundwork for Apex Legends. It established the in-world Apex games and even had an entire mission dedicated to the factory where the Battle Royale arenas were made. The multiplayer mode was also well received. It refined everything from the original game to be a bit more balanced and fully featured. There were more guns, better pilot abilities, a much more in-depth and robust Titan customization system, and even the maps felt better suited to the mixed combat system, giving both pilots and mechs solid combat spaces. However, despite its positive reviews, Titanfall 2 struggled to find a large player base. Many people put the blame on EA's choice of launch date, which sandwiched the game between Battlefield 1 and Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. And while I believe that to be without question a major factor in the overall sales, I also believe that the style of combat was a bit too niche for the size of audience that EA was looking to capture. So likely the budget and plans for the game exceeded the number of players that were actually looking for a very high-skill sci-fi shooter, despite its incredible design. Often,
that's an important thing to like note. When you make a video game, if you make the game skill curve too high, you won't sell a lot, because a lot of the casual audience of video games, they want to pick up a video game, play it, do good, and put it down, go do whatever, come back, pick it up, play it, do good. That's why Call of Duty is so successful. That's why Fortnite is successful. That's why Apex is successful. They're easier games that, sure, if you're very good, you're going to be very good and show off in a very good way. But a bad player can look good in those games, versus like someone like Halo, Titanfall, Gears of War, even to an extent Battlefield, and, you know, some other games that's been on this in this video. If the skill gap is so high and people who are new are struggling to like adjust to the game and learn how to play the game, then you'll get situations where it's like, I'm just not gonna freaking play the game. I love Titanfall 2, and I lean more to the side of, you know, the marketing is what really hurt it, because they literally did the same thing happens with Horizon Zero Dawn, where they released it around Juggernauts. But he's also right about potentially the skill gap being an issue. If you don't know how to be in the Titans aren't easy to use if you're, you know, a new player. So if you're getting in Titan and you're getting immediately destroyed by a pilot who has, you know, a secondary that's really good, you're pissed off. You get into your Titan and this one Titan is massacring you, you're pissed off. If you're getting destroyed by a pilot who's wall running and doing all these things with an alternator or whatnot, you stop wanting to play the game. You know, so skill gaps do matter, and they turn your game to being very niche.
Games with extremely high skill ceilings do a lot better with a much lower price for entry as well. Sadly, things got even more grim for the Titanfall franchise in the last few years as hackers have taken over many of the game's servers. It's actually kind of a wild situation in that there was a large organized hacking effort to actually hurt both games, and also that Respawn kind of just threw in the towel in terms of keeping the games playable. A tragic end for a game that really pushed the envelope of what's possible in an FPS. Anyway, there's plenty of other games that could have or should have been a lot bigger than they were. These are the ones that really stand out for me the most. I'd be curious to hear what games you would have on your list and why. I've always found it super interesting to analyze the game market, especially when it has to do with game failure due to reasons that could have been avoided or singular decisions that prevented them from greatness. Next up, check out this video on what killed an entire gaming genre. I find it to be pretty interesting and a
I've actually watched a video before yesterday. I watched this is about arena shooters basically dying out. This is a good video. I'm going to give them a like, and you guys should as well. To answer the question on games that I personally think, you know, were really good but didn't do great, Days Gone is a single player game. I think that game's phenomenal. I think it's one of the best games that Sony has put out, but you don't really hear talk about it all that often. It didn't really do well monetarily, which it won't get a sequel, but it should get a sequel. It's a phenomenal game. It's one of the best PlayStation games that I've played on PC. I'd say that all three Metro games are just amazing video games. Like all three of them, 2033, 2034, and Exodus, which is 2035. They're all based on books by the same names, you know, 2033, 2034, and 2035. They are just masterclass amazing video games, and they don't really, you know, have that big budget. I won't say they failed, but I feel like you can just use that title, they failed, just to associate with games that should have made more money than it did, and games that you don't see a lot of people talk about. There's a lot of games like that where you don't see a lot of people talk about them, but they're just outright amazing video games, and games that deserve sequels and things like that and more attention, but people don't really, you know, give them that attention. And for whatever reason, you know, people, like I said before, people are kind of like, I don't want to call it tribalism. People kind of just stick to what they know more so than trying things new. But with all that said, if this video, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoy. Do all things out with my big boy Nubis. I'm out of here. I'll catch you when I see you guys. Follow me on Twitch. Link in the description box below. Y'all be safe. Out.